Mary was absolutely, positively not a virgin when she gave birth to Jesus.
Because we have free speech, as a Christian, you're going to hear a lot of things that are just utterly foolish, stupid, or just simply clever ways to try to undermine our faith. One such thing that you'll hear is that Jesus was born not of a virgin, but born of a woman who had been with a man.
Mary was absolutely, positively not a virgin when she gave birth to Jesus.
Now, he says that Mary absolutely, positively was not a virgin. Listen to his scant evidence, which really is none, and we'll come back and we'll thoroughly, positively, without question, refute and debunk what he's saying.
That whole concept of virginity is kind of culturally defined anyway, but we know biologically that that is an impossibility, of course, in the 21st century.
He throws in that it's biologically an impossibility. Well, we're not talking about actual or the average human way of conception. Obviously, as far as we're concerned, there's only one way that it can be done, when a man and a woman come together. But we're talking about God. You know, God who actually created our biology, who does not operate under the same laws that we work as, because remember, he creates. He doesn't need anything to create. He doesn't need a male or a female to create anything. As a matter of fact, the first man was not created with the aid of a male and a woman prior to him. It's just God creating. And so to make the point that it's biologically impossible, well, with us it is, but with God, obviously it's not.
But even beyond that, listen to this. Matthew is trying to fulfill prophecy in Isaiah that he accidentally misinterprets. So Matthew is reading in the Greek, but the Hebrew word that Matthew interprets from Isaiah as virgin doesn't mean virgin. It means young woman.
The problem with what he's saying is that it may not even be that Matthew is reading from anything, but let's just assume that Matthew, for the sake of his argument, is reading from the Old Testament. In the Old Testament, well, before we go there, let's read what Matthew is reading. Matthew states in Matthew 1:23, he says, now the birth of Jesus Christ is as follows. And then we go down to verse 23 of Matthew chapter 1, and it says, behold, the virgin shall be with child and bear a son. Now the word that's used here is parthenos, which is the Greek word for virgin. Now, where would Matthew get this story from if he were indeed reading from the Old Testament? Well, he would get this story from Isaiah. Likely, if anyone was quoting from the Old Testament in that time, they were likely quoting from the Septuagint, the Greek version of the Old Testament manuscripts, the Greek version translated from the Hebrew. And let's look at what it says. Isaiah 7:14, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child. And the Greek word that's used there in the Septuagint is parthenos. Now, that word obviously must mean virgin. And first of all, it doesn't make any sense to say that it would be anything other than a virgin, because what sort of a sign is it that a woman who could have a child has a baby? Well, that's normal. That's how it happens. And so that's not necessarily a sign. But if we go to the Hebrew word for that's used there, and we'll come back to this, the Hebrew word that's used there is the Hebrew word for alma. Now, his point is that alma refers to just a young woman. Well, my question is going to be to him, if you want to use the word to describe a virgin, which word would you use? There's two words you would use, betula as well as alma. Before we make this point about how it's irrelevant what he's saying and how it's just really silly, let's go back and let him finish making his claim.
And some theologians have tried to say, well, you know, all young women in that society were virgins, but that's a pretty large interpretive leap, one that I'm not quite willing to make. So Matthew misinterprets this and applies it to his story. But even so, you know, in the ancient world, it was very common to say that someone was born of a virgin as a tool to foreshadow narratively that they were going to live an important life.
There's a reason why he's not willing to make this leap. One, because he's not godly, he's ungodly, he is demonic. Well, let's just get that out there. And how do we know so? Well, because of this.
Drag is holy. As long as I don't tell anyone they're going to hell, isn't it okay for me to believe in that? No. God is gay. God is a lesbian. God is trans. I think that most Christians miss the point. I don't think the point of Jesus' life was to die.
And no one is saying that all women in that culture were virgins. As a matter of fact, It was a sin if you were unmarried to have become defiled, so to speak, because that meant that a violation of the law had occurred. And what was to be done with that? By the way, fathers were not in the habit of giving away their sons to a woman who was not a virgin. Maybe she had a husband before. That's different. But that's certainly not some sort of special sign that a woman who has had a husband or a woman who was of age, who had been active sexually, then has a child. That's not really a sign. I want to go and look at the Bible. Let's go back to Isaiah 7. And this word that's used here is the word Alma. Question: does this word also refer to a young woman? Well, sure. It refers to a young woman of marriageable age who happened to be a virgin. Why do I say so? Well, let's go look at this word again, where both terms are used. Remember, in Genesis 24, Abraham is looking for a wife for his son. Let's read 24. Let's start in verse 15. Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. The girl was very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had relationships with her. Now, the word that's used here is the Hebrew word for virgin, which is the word Bethulah. And so this Bethulah, this virgin, we know this woman had no sexual relations because it says so, and had no relations with her. So this word is a different word that's used to describe a virgin. But notice what the word that's used describing the same girl in the same chapter. Notice what it says in verse 43. Behold, I am standing by the spring, and may it be that the maiden. Now, what's the word that's used here for this virgin? Some versions may even say virgin, the same word for Alma. So the word Alma and Bethulah are used interchangeably to describe this woman who has never been with a man, this young lady. She's of marriageable age. We know so because he's seeking a wife for his master's son. This woman is a virgin. And to make the claim even more so, let's go back to Matthew 1:23. It says, behold, the virgin shall be with a child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel. Now, the reason why that's important is because speaking of this same woman who is married, the Bible calls her a virgin. We know what a virgin means. Now, was she a virgin? Well, she says so herself. Going to Luke 1:34, who is clearly not reading out of any text in the past, this is what Mary is saying. She says, behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name his name Jesus. He will be great, and you will call his name, he will be called the Son of the Most High, and the Lord of God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and his kingdom will have no end. What is Mary's response? How can this be, since I am a virgin? Now, the word that's used there for virgin is different. Now, she's been described as a virgin. We know she's a virgin because she says she's a virgin. How do we know so? Well, look to the right. The Greek word that's used is andra ou gnosko. Andra is male, not gnosko, no. So a male I do not know. I have not known a man. I've not been with a man. So she describes herself as one. So the question is to this guy who's not a Christian, who's posing as a Christian, who wants to undermine Christianity, who better come to face with the actual creator of this world, who took on flesh, Christ, the Lord. You better come to face with him and place your faith in what he's done on the cross. That very same person who will die in his sins, that very same person who is trying to usurp and undermine the authority of the scriptures, that very same person, what is your evidence? Except for the fact that you want to thwart what the word is saying, what is your evidence? She says she was. The Bible calls her so. Matthew states it. Mark states it. Isaiah states it. We know the word that's used there, Alma, can be a virgin. It does mean a virgin. If you want to call someone a virgin in the Hebrew, you would use two words, Alma or Bethulah. In the Greek, it's Parthenos. And then also to make the point, it's clear. She says that she says she has not been with a man. Is she lying? I'm pretty sure you'll probably say she is. And so for the rest of us who are going to come in contact with someone who is just as vile, who is just as antithetical to the word, or maybe someone who legitimately wants to know the answer to the question, she herself says that she has not been with a man, and it makes sense. He was not born of a man with a sin nature like ours. The Bible says that he provides a body for the Son. Hebrews 10:5 says that a body you have prepared for me. This is God who takes on flesh, who came to die and pay a ransom, he could not have a sin nature like ours, because that would mean he would have succumbed to sin. And I understand for this person who thinks that sin is fungible, anything that goes against his woke ideology, anything that goes against what he is doing, his homosexual agenda, his trans agenda, that would be sin. But anything relating to holiness, anything relating to keeping the word of God, if you go against that, that's not sin. That's the kind of person who will find himself in hell, who probably doesn't believe there's a such thing as a hell, who will find himself there, and anyone else who will try to undermine or oppose the message of God. Reject this person. Although we're going to have to deal with more and more of them, be ready to fight against this kind of foolishness.